Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is the podcast where we go chasing the truth wherever it runs. And we are on episode number 133.
It was 133.
Thank you. Yes. There's something missing here today, and it feels a lot like somebody ripped the Oreo cookie apart and just licked out the interior filling and left the other parts for the rest of the podcast. Yes, we don't have our filling, our Oreo cookie filling. Brent is not with us today, but hey, if you're new to the podcast, you wouldn't even know he was missing anyway. But for those of you who are normally with us, we're glad you're joining us, and we are about to, well, that was really weird, but we're again, go back to the other episodes and you'll find out. But we're going to dive into a whole conversation about friends and stuff today, and my friend who is here, why don't you go ahead and say hi?
Hello, my name is Stephen Oldham. I'm the local outreach pastor here at Olive Branch. And if you're listening, let us know. We'd like to know where you're listening to us from. If you're on Spotify and you're giving us a listen there, subscribe, like, do whatever they ask you to do with the stars. The other one is if you're watching us on YouTube, like and subscribe and hit the bell to get all the updates from the website, our YouTube channel. And let us know you're watching there too, but share it with a friend. I think that's the most important thing.
And my name is Greg Harris. I'm the senior pastor at Olive Branch, the church that sponsors the podcast. And for those of you who are part of our regular listeners, or maybe you're just curious and you have a question, we'd love to hear from you. We love your jokes. We love getting your information. We love hearing about all kinds of cool things like where you wore the T-shirt and stuff like that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But you got an opportunity to let us know by sending your emails to us at rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. In fact, Stephen, like I just said, somebody did send something to us, right? That was from another country.
What's her name? Sylvia? Sylvia, yeah. Her friend Katie went all the way to Australia with our Rabbit Trail shirt. So thank you very much. It's a beautiful picture of the Sydney, Australia. Is it orchestra house? The one that's in the
show it there. It's
okay, I don't know if you can see it.
I don't know if you can see it either, but we can go with the accent for a little
while.
Woohoo! Look like that.
There you
Beautiful.
go.
What an exciting time for all of us to be hanging out down in Australia, you know?
So good day
stop.
to our Australian friends. I apologize.
Please pick a country, and we will go ahead and all the Australian friends down there.
We know you don't drink Foster's.
No, we know that. And it's not Australian for bear. So anyway. Sorry, having fun. Too much fun. I like accents. If I can't have fun with accents, what am I gonna do? But anyway, yeah, we do not have Brent here, so we don't have bad jokes, which to me is like
other than Australian jokes.
It's just kind of a relief, though. I'd rather throw an Australian accent around once in a while than hear another one of those. So, actually, Debbie, we like your jokes, but Brent's jokes, they're just. Never mind. So we're going to move forward today, and we're going to jump straight into our first segment here, which is Stephen's first impressions.
Yeah.
So
I don't know what was in the water, but man, we got a lot more comments on YouTube this particular week.
The interweb blew up.
Some of them great. Thank you for the happy ones. But we like to read the ones that are weird so that we can have a cool conversation.
Yeah, he likes the dark side of the internet, folks. Let's see how this goes.
Yes, the dark side.
Oh, by the way,
right.
We just have to take a minute and just thank the Lord for James Earl Jones.
Yes, and his translation of the Bible.
Just all the wonderful things that he did for us. So.
Yes. Man, he had such a great voice.
Yeah, he did, man. So cool. Thank you, Lord. Amen. All right.
Amen. All right. A final appreciation. Disney forgot his birthday at one point, and so people were really upset online. So we didn't forget the fact that he passed away at the very least. So that's good. Yeah, so let's go into the dark side of the internet. The first one is when we're talking about understanding the purpose behind the laws, when we go deeper into the laws and what they actually entail.
By the way, again, just so
this is the short.
Checking these shorts out, like go to the full length presentation. They make so much more sense.
Yeah, these shorts aren't going to make sense. They're supposed to try and tease you into seeing the longer conversations. So if you are catching these or you're picking up these comments,
or you're sharing them,
make sure you know that there's a greater context to each of these things. Because man, sometimes the stuff gets cut in ways that you're like, oh, I want to explain it that way, or I don't know if that sounds the same.
Or Brent sounds like a bigot.
Yeah. So it's interesting. That's why this is kind of fun. So the first one is from understanding the law, purpose of the law. Pretty sure any common law predates all of your religions. No deity is required to know that. Some things are just wrong. Only empathy. And then, so that was their statement.
That's
there.
Interesting. I would like to know the common law that existed prior to Christianity or Judaism.
I'd like to know the empathy that existed prior to Judaism and Christianity.
That is a very modern concept, I know.
Yeah, the idea that you think that empathy is the same throughout all of eternity, I mean, from all of, not eternity, but all of since mankind, and that it hasn't been influenced by, a creator God is interesting. First off, the question I have about law isn't the written law. What I'm talking about is common law it's above the written law. It's actually something that all of us innately know is right and wrong, but we don't do it. So we end up having to write it down so that we know and when people do this, they typically come up with similar laws. And so what they call that is the common law. As a Christian, to me, the common law is an extension of God's justice, that he's placed in us the ability to know right from wrong, in the sense that he gave us a conscience.
You're talking natural law, basically?
Yeah, and the common law is based on natural law. And natural law is an attribute of God, so as far as his justice is concerned.
And by the way, I think that why I feel like that, I'm just going to say the comment's a bit ignorant, is because if he's even thinking of Hammurabi's law, Hammurabi wrote that with the knowledge that he thought he was the divine.
You're right.
And so it's not
pretty religious.
Like you can't, and we do this funny thing, and this was mentioned in another podcast I've listened to, an author's podcast, and they'll describe these ancient people like a gladiator or whatever. I think maybe I said this last week, but it was like this reality that we think somehow, like I'm like the modern person's in the midst of this ancient world where nobody believes in these gods. This is all ridiculous. No, they all believed in these gods. There was no common law. There's no concept of a common law that emerges anti-deity,
right,
until like the last 400 years, since the Enlightenment, and now today that's completely falling apart. In fact, I would challenge the person to go back and study some Roman history and check out not the Tom Holland of Spider-Man, but the Tom Holland.
Right, that's true. Tom Holland wrote that book.
Yeah, Tom Holland writes this entire series on Rome. In fact, he's not a Christian, but he points out that as he studied Rome and the way Rome thought, like, for example, empathy. Let's talk about empathy for a second. You would look at your baby-born daughter, and as a Roman father, you had no problem just going, it's a girl, throw her in the Tabor, and would just walk away.
Right.
Like, just throw her out. We don't want her. Like, there was no empathy going on there.
Or if the person was born lame or had a broken arm or leg and it wasn't going to grow or mend when they were a baby, oftentimes they were tossed aside because they weren't useful.
Which is an odd thing people don't realize because they're so used to the Bible stories.
Yeah.
It was really the Jewish people that had lame and blind and different kinds of people.
Most cultures killed them.
Because most cultures just killed them. In fact, that still happens today.
Right.
The vast majorities of abortions are done on children who have Down syndrome.
Right.
Or are done on women who are undesired when they're discovered in the womb. This is still the same human nature. Where's the empathy for the baby in the womb? Where's the empathy for that child who's going to grow up, maybe and not have the most like similar life as you in the way that you think of what is good or whatever. To me, this is a very myopic vision of human history. It's very small.
The other thing is if you empathize with somebody, that doesn't tell you what you should do. It tells you how you feel. If I empathize with someone's plight, it doesn't mean that they should or shouldn't be punished. It's like, I feel sorry for you. Some people interpret empathy as just sorry. I feel your feelings, so therefore, I relate to you. Well, I can relate to somebody who did something wrong and feel really bad that they did it and still think they should go get punished for it because it's the best for them. So it's not even a matter of like, we all can have empathy towards the same thing and have completely different ideas of what to do with that empathy. So even if you have empathy, it's not going to create the same laws without something greater than the standard that all people need to be judged by.
Not to mention the greatest, I think it's called the hero effect. I don't quite remember the terminology given to it. But there is this problem that we have that the highest virtues we hold to in a society are actually those that are not helpful in empathy. Like self-sacrifice, you don't empathize with the self-sacrificial. In fact, most people in a power dynamic would look at that and go, that's ridiculous. Why are you killing yourself? Like, I wouldn't want to kill myself. Why would you want to kill yourself?
Yeah.
And it's not. It's sacrifice on behalf of the other person.
And some cultures empathize with people that we would think were the villains. They would say they were the heroes.
Yeah. In fact, I think of this. Then there's this story out there called the Sawi culture. And this is a known culture that existed in the early 1900s that was found in Indonesia. And when Don Richardson came into this culture in Indonesia, and he was bringing the gospel, and he finally gets the language down, teaches the people. These are headhunters. These are like a full-blown headhunter society. They ultimately celebrated Judas because they believed he was the most moral person in the book because he had pulled off the greatest deception possible and killed Jesus, because their entire ethic was based on deception. It was the whole entire tribal unit was based on this concept: how long can you fatten somebody up and be with them until you kill them, and then you'd ultimately eat them, but which is really weird. But you can read about it in Peace Child. It's a known legitimate anthropological people that to this day are not that way anymore because they received Jesus. Again, this is just, it's myopic of not only world history and ancient history, it's myopic about culture. Like the culture this person's growing up in is actually inherently Christian, which empathy is a Christian virtue. And so,
what was the name of the author again of this book? Tom Holland. I know in some of I was watching a lecture.
I think his book is called Dominion.
Yeah, he was saying that like what he ended up doing is taking a second look at Christianity because of the fact that he thought most of what he believed in the modern world came from Rome, and he discovered that wasn't the case, that it came from Christianity. And he noticed that all the benefits and thoughts that he thinks that determined what he thought was good came from Christianity. It didn't come from Rome. And I think a lot of people are discovering this when they start looking at the history. So give it a check out. All right. So the other one is on the sharing your faith at work. And this was Brent talking. But the short starts off with a large scoffer or something like that in the video.
Oh, yeah. Where our interior of our Oreo cookie is yelling at people.
So it seems like he was yelling, but he was in the middle of a sentence saying, when someone is a scoffer. So maybe that's why this person just put, "You're a scoffer, sir, Jesus." So maybe he's speaking for Jesus, or Jesus gave him the comment to write, or maybe he's saying that Jesus...
Or you're a scoffer minus Jesus?
It could be a minus Jesus.
Like you're a scoffer if you don't have Jesus.
Maybe. But the guy's name is Snug Johnson, so I don't know what that means. But it is interesting. It's more of a Rorschach test. The other one was trusting God through imperfect community relationships, because we're talking about how church is filled with imperfect people, but you have to trust that God uses imperfect people in coming to church. So we're talking about crowds, and we're talking about disciples being pulled from the crowds. In the crowd, stupidity is summed up, period. Spiritual connections are solely personal. And this person's name is Jup4845. Jup. Okay, Jup. I'm not quite sure what you mean, but I think that you can have a spiritual connection with a group of people in a crowd. I mean, people do it at concerts, people do it at church, people have a connection to the community is both a good and a bad thing and can be healthy. Yes, you feel it as an individual, but you can't experience it as an individual without the crowd being present. So in that sense, there's this personal, but it's not solely. And I think that's the word I would push back on. I
think this gets back to the hyper-American individualism, and Tom Holland would then say, "Hey, Christians, stay weird." That's kind of his statement, right? And what I want to say is, we're weird. I made an argument that I didn't actually make. It came from Justin Early in his book on friendship that we've been quoting. And I think he's right when he says because we're made in the image of the Trinity, because the Father, Son, Holy Spirit is an eternal community within himself. God is, Trinity fun talk, right? That we can get into some of that if we want to today, but that you cannot know God as God intends you to know him apart from other people. That therefore spiritual reality cannot truly be fully experienced in a personalized endeavor. In fact, church history is interesting about this. The idea of the personal devotion with God, we would call this pietism, doesn't come about until the 1600s, I think, and it's
or was an individual way of having faith,
right?
More individualized.
The pietists were considered what? Why are you going
You're
away?
Part of a
having
community.
No personal talk with God. That's not how God designed us. There was no major denomination, Protestant, Catholic, Eastern, or otherwise, that was you're best off by yourself, unless you were a monk. And then they were like, and sometimes those monks they thought were cuckoo, right? You're going to go live in a cave, sit on a pole all by yourself. It was like, they often were condemned for not having this like relational community. And even most of these monks didn't do it alone. They ultimately had full-on communities.
It's kind of hard to separate yourself and survive.
Exactly. And that's just something we don't understand in a culture where we think my refrigerator feeds me and food magically shows up at the grocery store. And
I don't need to fish.
Spiritual. And so spiritual things, think about it. You don't have a spiritual encounter with the divine apart from another human being. In fact, a human being, because how could you have a concept of the divine if a human being hadn't helped you understand these concepts, given you a language for it called English, enabled you to be here on this planet. There is no way that even
there's no such thing as an island.
Personal experience is actually not granted and connected to other people. Now, your experience is yours, and yet that experience is influenced by the interpretation you've received from other people and how you take it in from your worldview, which is given to you by other people. There's so much understanding in the philosophical realm right now, and identity is not found within. Identity is found oftentimes more by
an objective outside.
Yeah, the objective people around you and who you identify and connect with. And so there's all of this give and take between even your personal experience and the subjective in attachment to the objective realities around you.
There's better comprehension in numbers. In groups of people, you get more information. I mean, we're just like on a psychology level, people who are usually in the worst condition are alone for too long. So if I isolate you from a crowd and you become too individualistic, you actually become less humanized. You kind of act more animalistic. So people this is why we do whole stories about people living on a stranded island trying desperately to just stay alive. You don't get
talking to volleyballs.
Yeah. Well, you're trying to have some human connection, and that's usually the thing. I'm going to try and steel man this argument just to see, because I do think there's something interesting if you take it a different way. In the crowd, stupidity is summed up. I would say that the Bible is not saying that crowds are smart. And I would say history has a tendency that crowds can go many different ways,
right?
And the thing about it is we think a crowd is stupid, but I think I'm not. And the thing is you put me in a crowd, and by the sheer nature of me being there, I'm a part of the crowd that might be stupid, and they have a sway over us that we as individuals don't particularly care for. And I have to be careful because I realized how quickly I can change my entire position just by joining the military. And within 8 weeks of basic training, I'm thinking completely different because of this system that's made to make me think different. And you don't even realize how long-term that effect is until later on. You're like, I still fold this shirt this way or do this still this way. And I think because we are people that are meant to be in connection with other people, we don't realize both the negative and the positive aspects of what a crowd can do to us. And I think that's what I like about Jesus in the sermon. The idea is that Jesus knows a crowd. He's still trying to talk to the crowd, persuade them with the truth.
Yeah, he still loves the crowd.
He still loves them, but he's not led by them.
He's going to heal them and touch but he's not pandering to the crowd.
And I think that's the difference. Some people want the crowd to love them, and so they pander and change their principles. Where Jesus is not going to do that. He's
going to back away from the crowd. He's going to tell the crowd get lost. He's not going to listen to them. I mean, he's going to push back on the crowd.
You just see this perfect explanation of a guy who's comfortable with who he is because of his relationship with God. He's able to love a crowd and not be swayed by it. He's able to deal with the crowd and whether it loves him or hates him. And that's kind of the goal, I think, for any leader to look at this person who, I love you guys. I'm trying to persuade you. I'm calling people to draw you closer to my Father. But also, I know how you are, and I'm not confused as to what a crowd can do, the evil a crowd can do. So in that sense, his individual connection to Christ keeps him from that, but it doesn't mean he still doesn't need people. And that's the other thing about Christ that's awesome. In your sermon, you talked about how he had friends and that he needed to call on when he needed a personal connection and needed them to pray for him. And that's a part of the human condition. So it's just a perfect model of friendship when you look at the life of Christ. So anyway, lots and lots of comments.
Absolutely. Tons of comments, and we can't get to all of them.
Not now. I think we'll save some for next week because, maybe we won't have as many, but I'll save a few.
But hey, for the sake of all of us, we have been working through a series called Friends.irl in real life. And
For the boomers.
Yeah, for the series, it's really a conversation. I just loved the fact that we started off with the boomers wouldn't know what IRL is, but they're probably the ones who've experienced it the most. They're the ones who had friends in real life.
They just called it life.
Yeah, and they're just like, oh, friends on Earth, friends in reality.
You have friends on devices? What is that like?
That sounds like an imaginary friend to me.
Yeah, you sure he's your friend? Have you ever seen him? You never hang out.
Oh man, you got that down. That's so true. And so we covered off on a few things. Like I hit 3 main points where, in order to, because we're starting to talk about how to make friends, right? We defined a friend, and I want to remind us that it's to be fully known and still be loved. But this is the problem. Like, okay, and I'm going to let you just go off here for a minute because you've got the floor. But this is an issue. Like, and I think a lot of married people don't understand how difficult it is to find. Like, I can say find friends, and legitimately that is true for many singles, let alone find somebody to date or something else like that. Like, how would you kind of help open that door for someone like Brent, who just isn't here to defend himself?
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I mean, for those people who may not know, I was a singles minister for a while, and so I help singles try to integrate into the church, not just separate. But there is a tendency when you have these two groups in the church that there can be some really painful moments that exchange back and forth. And part of it is like churches have not known what to do with singles because the model that they're very comfortable with is the majority, taking care of the needs of the majority of the people that are there, which are mostly married people in any particular congregation. Now, over the last several decades, that has changed dramatically because there are more and more single people in church than ever before, I think, in history for right now. And
I think the actual statistic that I heard quoted that is like 50%, somewhere around the 50% marker of people in the age of 40 have never been married.
Yeah, that number has grown for sure. But also there's a lot more divorced, a lot more people who are, have lost a spouse because of COVID. It's just like there are a lot more single people going to church now. But yet historically, there was one church, and I'm not going to name names, who just, ended their services because they felt it was too hard to manage. Because single people, they were sleeping around, they were doing a bunch of bad things, so we end that ministry. The question I have isn't that you might not need to end that ministry. The question is, I don't know if you'd ever do that if there was something about marriage. You wouldn't go like, we had a couple people cheat in the marriage ministry, so we're shutting down the marriage ministry, we're never having it again. And so this idea that somehow it's easy for people to connect the way you connected when you were younger.
It's a quarter of 40-year-olds in the United States, according to the census, has never been married.
Yeah, and so it's becoming a bigger and bigger population.
Huge, up 20% since 2010.
So when you go to a church, you just ask yourself, if I were single, how many of the resources of the church would apply to me? Or do I have to, what I do is, or do I have to translate? Like when you get married, there's a lot of that from the pulpit or having all of the examples from the preaching. I think you do this pretty well. You kind of spread out your examples. You don't just make them all about a marriage relationship so that it can relate to other people. But a lot of times I've sat through years of service and never heard anything about, if you're single, this is what this would look like, unless they're thinking of a single that's 25. So you get to a certain age, and what you realize after the age of 28 to 30, if you're not married by then and your friends are, you've lost most of them either through time, even if you're still friendships, you still have to work through a lot to continue to hold on to those friendships. They're saying as men, the older you get, they literally just don't have any friends at a certain point.
Well, after 25, it starts to depreciate in the number of friends that are actually there.
And they're thinking that men are unsatisfied with this. I think the problem is that men are okay with this. A lot of men, now that they have what they consider their primary friendship with their wife, they feel like it's not as important to keep outside friendships unless they're just through life cycles of things like, my neighbor, come to help.
There was a cultural, especially in the middle class, there's a cultural emphasis I've found that, and I've met this quite a few times, and at least in my family and some other families. So take that anecdotally. It's not like I don't have percentages here. But what I've discovered over fairly middle-class families and stuff, and all of them kind of fit this bill, was that the husband, when you get married, you focus on the spouse's family, and you focus on your spouse, and, go to work hard. In fact, that was reinforced for many years in a lot of men's ministries, like, you be the best husband for you. But it wasn't ever like, go be the best friend. to your single friend. Go be the best, friend and husband at the same time, because it makes your marriage better, which is actually the evidence. The evidence is that your marriage is stronger when you have, as a man or a woman, friends outside of your marriage and they are strong. And even if it's other couples or just singles that are your friends, or just one of the couple, that marriage is stronger. Always, because they're like giving off the load. Like, this is the thing. People don't realize, like, single people, they are lonely, because they're lonely at a level that is unheard of. And in fact, many married people, I think a lot of singles don't realize, many married people live single lives.
Yeah.
Because they're just living with somebody in their home. They never integrated their marriage to where they're unified. And so a lot of married people feel like it's just, there's this inconvenient person I'm living with after so many years.
Part of that,
they're living like a single person. Yet, even worse, they've got somebody in their home they shouldn't feel that way about.
This is a uniquely American or Western problem in many ways, is because when people marry, they remove themselves from the clan or the community. It doesn't mean that you don't, but the kin ties were way closer. When you start looking at something like the Bible, if someone were to separate in a family, that could affect the entire family economically in the Old Testament. And so marriages had more.
In the New Testament. This is, remember, we're talking since the advent of the freeways is really when all of American culture radically shifted to this.
On the farm is the same kind of problem. Yeah, and the thing was,
in the city, even you couldn't get that far. You were gonna meet people, and you were gonna be in your enclave, and that's why you have Chinatown and Little Italy and these places. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, we segregated communities up. This was the natural reaction of what happens when you didn't move very far. And guess what? Yeah, you got expected that you're an Italian girl, go marry the Italian boy down the street. And we're actually shipping an Italian over from Italy, and you're going to marry him. We're watching the movie on Disney Plus about the woman who crossed she swam across the
channel?
The channel.
The English channel?
English channel. First one to do it. And just kind of all what she had to go through. It was excellent movie. Really, really good. But one of the funny things was that, like, she grows up in this particular enclave, and sure enough, they're setting their marriages up with these butchers who don't speak English from another country, because, hey, that's what we do. It's a Hungarian, we're going to do this kind of thing. And you're like, whoa. But this is the world that we don't live in. We don't know how different we are. Yeah, and this is the problem. So singleness and marital stress and parental stress, they're discovering now. I just heard another thing, that people who have children today are claiming it's more stressful at levels we've never seen before. Like, it's the most stressful thing in the world. And it's because, in fact, the play date, the old, you know what a play date is, right? Hey, my kid's going to play with you. Hovering over their kids, this gentle parenting stuff where you got, oh my gosh, my kid, and he gets to have what he wants. And so you're just the whims and all, which just, it's causing massive amounts of anxiety. And it's because we've lost our kin ties. We've lost mom and grandma showing us how it really is done.
Yeah, there used to be a community investment in any particular relationship, because they used to have a divorce or a marriage that wasn't going well affected everyone in the community more than it does today. And people think, well, that's a good thing that we've changed. And I don't know if it is, because I think we have the illusion that it doesn't affect other people that well. But in reality, I don't think that's true. So, like, whatever you think of Bill and Melinda Gates, Bill Gates, he runs a large company. Mm-hmm. Him and his wife got divorced. She took half of the philanthropic opportunities that they were doing, all of these things supposedly for other charities and stuff, and now you've split that in half. That affects everyone who is being helped. That affects everyone who's being employed by Bill Gates. Their marriage relationship affected everyone in the community and everyone who in the product and everyone in the business. And we think, oh, that doesn't matter. That's none of my business. I don't know that it isn't, because that affects people's lives. I'm not saying that there should be a law. I'm just saying that there is a connection that we have when someone's resources, that we say this right now, is like, we've taught people in poor situations that it's better to stay not married because of the fact that you get more money from the government. Well, it makes it harder on the mother, in where she used to have someone that was held accountable to helping her and a community helping her. Now she's doing it on her own, but the government is giving her money to do that. You've broken that economy down. You've broken that marriage down, and now it's affecting everyone in the community, because everyone's paying for that, and we're paying for that, and that person's trying to suffer through parenting a child without the proper connections from the community.
And then there was the concept that what has hurt women in those scenarios even more is the two-income trap.
Yeah.
Because now you have families who have two incomes coming, and the single mom only can have one income. She is locked out of housing. She's locked out of the food rises. It gets
but the money doesn't go up all that much.
Because the money can't go up, because you'll lose it. You can't fight against two incomes.
Yeah.
And so it's a cycle that's really difficult.
But it affects everybody in the community. That person's marital status and their child's relationships and the struggles that they're going through. So it's not in a vacuum.
So this is the problem. Like, so how do you solve some of these problems? Like, I'm not an advocate for using government and these kinds of things. I am an advocate for church. I really believe that Jesus did call us to not be a overly mobile people as a church, but to be a people who are investing in one another, like as friends. So I think when we talk about how do I find friends, let alone how do you find a spouse, or how would you find somebody who's even going to be a support system for you if you are single, if you don't have children. I think a lot of these young adults need to remember that if you do not have kids, you're going it alone. You're trusting a really rickety system. It's a really old, rickety system called Social Security. That
probably won't be there by the time.
I just heard the other day that if we'd gone with George Bush's, like, put Social Security into a portion of it and privatized it into the
public
exchange, there'd be more money in Social Security now, because what the dividends would have poured out than we have in debt 3 times over. Something, it's like some crazy astronomical number. But anyway, all that is to say that, like, you lose out on support systems. You don't have somebody who's going to come visit you. You don't have this family that's going to be behind you. And so maybe it's stressful and scary and expensive in your mind, but the investment that returns to you when you're older, and grandchildren or children and grandchildren, these kinds of things is there. Single people don't get that. What they need are friends who have kids, who care about their friends, like uncles and aunts or brothers or sisters. And it is incumbent upon us as Christians then to think of ourselves as friend-making people. We ought to be friendly.
Yeah.
We ought to be friend makers. And so the best way I know to begin that journey is not only just having a church service where we're pulling a whole bunch of people together, but then to be hospitable in those church services. I mean, when we're together, are you looking around for the new people? Are you looking around to sit with somebody who looks lonely? Say hi to somebody who maybe has never been there before. Invest in the smallest ounce to just ensure that they can have a community that they can connect with. I don't think church should be big or small or whatever. Again, I'm not into this like, oh my gosh, it's such a huge crowd, I can't find anybody. Yes, you can. I went to a very large church, and every time I go to a very large church, all you have to do is engage. And you jump in a ministry, connect in a small group, just walk up and say hi to people, go to a study. There's plenty of ways to engage. It's just don't expect to get the intimacy out of the big service, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's different settings that you want to be aware of what the setting is that's being created. Also, the people who design a church service should be aware of what setting they're creating and what public space they're in, because it determines the expectation. If you're expecting to come to church where everyone's seat is pointed forward and you're watching someone speak for 25, 35 minutes and then leave and think you're going to find friends all that while between the 5 minutes before it starts and the 15 minutes that you might hang out afterwards, you're going to be disappointed. That's a very difficult place to find friendship. Now, it'll make it easier than if you didn't go at all, But you're kind of probably have to find another level to engage that group of people. But it does allow you to look around and see if there's opportunities to talk.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the sociological studies will talk about this idea of space and the amount of people in it. So like I was joking, like you're sitting in a stadium, you're not going to walk up and go, hey, can I just tell you about how my friend died last week? And like, you're not going to open up your deepest, darkest secrets and heart at the stadium to some random stranger that you've never met before. Yeah, you're going to just get arrested and taken away. But you also wouldn't go up in a random stranger thing and go like, oh my gosh, you know what? I love chess and you love chess. Let's play chess right here. Like, time out. There's right spaces for right things. This is why a lot of people feel awkward on airplanes, right? This was something that was
airplanes and in elevators.
Elevators, right? In an airplane setting, you have hundreds of people all facing the same direction,
all facing direct,
and you're in the most intimate of settings because you're right next to the person. You smell them, you hear them crying, they kick you.
Yeah, no, the elevator's the same. Like the idea behind a public space is everyone's facing one section because they don't want to draw attention. They're there to look at something or do something. The problem is when a space is designed that it actually forces two different scenarios together. So usually you're so close to someone on an airplane, it's an intimate space, but they're trying to make it a public space by pointing all the seats forward so you don't feel uncomfortable, but you're still going to feel uncomfortable. That's why if you really want to freak people out, get on an elevator and just turn around towards everyone else, and as they look towards the door, they're trying to get out so they can go be in a personal space, and they're waiting for the opportunity to get out of that space to go there. But if you turn around, you're turning it into a private space now, and you're making it very, very intimate for people, and it really makes them uncomfortable. Same thing on an airplane. If all of a sudden you stood up in the aisle and turned towards everybody and be like, "Hi, everybody, how are you?" It's all of a sudden you're
preaching the gospel.
Yeah, or you start trying to have an intimate relationship with someone on the middle of it.
Well, they're not going to do that anymore. In fact, what's fascinating is that all we've turned our planes into is individualized movie theaters. I mean, like they're just little theater seats where you sit and you stare at your thing and listen to what you have, and don't interact with me. It's also, the funny thing is, like, you're going into a grocery store. You feel fine. You walk around. You may even greet people and say hi as you walk by. The second they put you in the intimate space of a line, if somebody was just spin around and start talking to you, you feel awkward. Because it's like, wait, I didn't make a deal that this is the intimate space that, like, we're allowed to. People will do it, and you can do it in a friendly way, but like that's one of those weird spaces. Like a line can feel like, oh, it's a violation of spaces. So all of that is to remind you that when you come on a Sunday morning to church, say you've had to move to another place, you're watching the podcast, you haven't figured it out yet. You feel like it's easier to watch online than it is, but I'm lonely, than it is to go to church. I'm lonely. I don't know what to do. Number one, don't expect to make friends in the big service crowd. Now, you could go to a small church, and it could be 50 people, which is, the vast majority of churches across America are less than 100 people, less than 125, I think. And when you go there, what you're going to discover is they're all going to come out and meet you. They'll even stop the service to say hi, and it's a very different environment when you're down under that 100 level and it's one service and everybody's there at the same time. And you may end up visiting the first day and leaving as a volunteer of something. You just don't realize that it is that intimate that quickly because you're in their tribe. It's really what we would call a middle group. And that's kind of the next level when we talk about this. Larger churches with 100 plus people is not go at a service or several services is not where you find the friends. It's a
public
level.
Space.
Yeah, it's the next level. It's the what we call a middle space, middle group. It's not your small group where it's all almost feels a little too intimate.
It's a social space.
It's a social space. It's what you get when what people get when they go to a bar.
It's like 20 to 70, anywhere between that range of people.
Yeah,
and they're not pointed in one direction usually.
It's why we do tables at men's groups. It's why a Bible study that has about 30 people, everybody's going to get a chance to talk and connect, and you get to get to know each other. It feels weird that you didn't talk. You didn't get to know anybody. There was no fluid time. Like if you start running, this is what's weird about a classroom, right? A classroom doesn't feel great when all it is a lecture and there's 10 of you in the class. That's why a lot of classrooms in collegiate levels, you don't have rows, you have circles, and the professor sits in the circle with you, and you back and forth and converse.
Yeah.
Because it's not I lecture and you listen. It is we're going to work these things out.
Well, typically you can see the difference. A public space would be the classroom. A social space would be the playground. Everybody's playing around. You go, oh, okay, I'm looking around. Okay, those people are playing games I kind of like. Or, hey, there's the boys over there if you're a little kid. That's the social space. You're trying to find out who will you associate with in a group. And it allows you to kind of roam around and get to know people in a safe environment.
And you can eventually find that smaller unit.
Yeah.
You all like that same thing. Oh, I love handball. You love handball. Let's play handball.
It's like when I used to go to a party, I'm looking for people who are sitting away who don't enjoy parties. I was like, those are my introverts. You know, I start looking around for them. Oh, they're over there. Okay, I'm going to go sit and have a conversation with them. Just like there's like 3 or 4 of us and everybody's, just sitting there kind of quietly.
And oftentimes you have the greatest conversations.
Yeah.
While everybody else is like, okay, bye.
Went to a party and asked the guy, well, so what's your favorite philosopher? We had the greatest conversation.
Yeah, really? You
yeah,
did that?
yeah.
Oh, I got to hear this one.
Well, it was a college party, so I figured somebody there would be interested in an interesting conversation. Everyone else was just partying and stuff. But I went to the guy. I was like, hey, he's like, this is so-and-so. Yeah, I'm a philosophy major. Oh, great. Let's have a seat. What's your favorite philosopher? We just had this long conversation about philosophy. But everyone else is partying at the party. That's what I was looking for, was a way to have a college conversation in a comfortable environment. So that's what the social space requires.
But that's a great example. So like here at Olive Branch, like if you are coming here, where would you say is those middle group levels?
Well, we try very hard to create spaces personally to enjoy something public, but also have a moment of private or a moment of social. So when we do a play, that's a public setting, but we try to break that up at the end of the play so you can hang out with your family. Long intermissions, long time to hang out, sit. I don't kick people out real quick. We change the arrangement of the chairs outside so you can kind of sit in circles and groups. You can kind of walk around, talk. So I just made a public space a social space. And you can talk about the play because now I gave you an artifact to talk about. You can say, do you like that? You didn't? Oh, hey, what brings you here? I brought my friend. So I've met other people's neighbors. So I brought my neighbors, like, oh, hi, what's your name? And so they live up the street. And it's just a way to create those spaces. We try to have potlucks. We try to have celebrations.
I want to bring that one out because Jacob, who's our producer, and one of his visions is like, hey, how do we get the community up? And so he's really pushing for potlucks. He's going to start these social spaces with potlucks. And I love that because you're not going to get hundreds and hundreds of people there, and you shouldn't want that. You really should want it to be enough that you can connect with some people. And even if it is hundreds of people, but you're sitting at tables, those tables will begin to facilitate a smaller unit. You'll get to know new people. The other thing is that like our men's ministries, like our breakfasts or our women's ministries, their gatherings, these are middle group levels. And what you'll find at a middle group level is you're able to share a little bit about your life, but not feel like I have to overshare and get into the
you share
details.
your comfort level.
You literally, it's like, hey, you get to tell your name, how many kids you have, where you work, and kind of the social niceties. But that's how you start having friends. And I think, I'm really bad at the chit chat level talk at those kinds of things. Yeah, I'm not great at small talk. I want to go deep dive.
You don't ask people what their favorite philosopher is?
Oh, immediately. And I want to go, and how does that make you feel? I'm just kidding.
You ask that to someone who's not interested. It's like, I don't have a clue, dude. So I knew my audience. That's what the crowd allowed me to do.
I know if you're a sports person, I can ask certain questions.
But that's real easy.
Lived in the area. I've got over the years, I've figured out what helps me out. But what we really want to do is be sure that when you're trying to build those friendships, is find those like people and then do something with it. I think this is the part people don't understand. That everybody's passive because the internet's made us passive.
Yeah.
Phone calls have made us passive. We think, oh, everybody's going to come get me. Be active. Be the one who sets it up. Be the one who does it. One of the things I love about my kids, my wife has taught them, is that they go, I want a game night. They bring all their friends over. They don't wait for somebody else to go, hey, let's do a game night. Like, okay, tell me when. When that happens, nothing happens. But they've gotten extremely active and like, no, I want it. Come over. We're doing this. If you can make it, you make it. And they've formed their friendships around their likes and their enjoyments. And now the others have started to pick it up because now they feel like a group and they're a group of friends. And so now, boom, they're starting to do other things and other interests are kicking in. For me, it's hard because you end up with this blank spot. And one of the things I want to suggest to people is if you're interested, say you're single You're interested in meeting other people. It doesn't even have to be, don't start with I want a singles ministry. I want to meet other singles. Start with I just want to hang out with other people. What's your interest? Come tell us. Let us know. If it's something you're willing to open the doors here at the church over, and we can trust you because we know you're part of the church or whatever, we'll let you use a room at the church. And boom, invite people and start. It's not a ministry. It's just a gathering. And we got to be okay as churches, especially in a world like this where we have proactive people who start gatherings. And those gatherings are where friendships are formed. They start out there. Would you agree?
Yeah. No, I think it's also it behooves people with the gifts that God's given them of hospitality or of drawing people, because you may be the one that draws everybody, but you may not be the one who keeps everybody there. So if you find a friend, say, hey, why don't we do this together? Be willing to jump in with other people if you're not the first jumper. But share your passions and interests and look around for people who share them with you. I think will help you start to find friendships or places to talk. Because it goes from that level to the more personal level after that. So that way you start going in a crowd, you find some friends that play games, then you go to someone's house and there's like 6 or 7 of you, and that's where you start talking, playing games, and getting to know people on a personal level. And at the church, we facilitate that with small groups. You know, 'cause I don't think of small groups as a social space. I think it's sometimes hard to find friends at a small group because it's forced into the personal space, and now you're sharing personal before you got a chance to set up. Do I want to be personal with this person? And so you have to kind of work through what I consider the affinity. So usually your affinity is in Christ, and so the small group centers around that affinity. And whatever you guys do, you share that personal nature from that affinity. But it's not going to be like the same as like, I really have friends that like the same things I am. But it's not necessarily unhealthy. I think it's good to have to develop the strength of your intimacy centered around Christ is an important thing to do. It's one less lonely place that you'll be in a period of your life. It's just not going to carry everything that you want. So if you're single and you're going into a small group to find your best friend, you might want to lower your expectations a little bit. What you'll find is someone will encourage you to grow closer to the Lord, and then you might find friends easier, I think. But
again, I would advise going in the larger group.
Go to the larger group.
To that middle group, like a women's thing, just
men's group,
and slowly try to find
breakfast.
people who are interested in similar things that you are. Those affinities, like C.S. Lewis. I already said this last time. Read Four Loves, awesome book. He really does a great job. In the friendship section, it's not as biblical, but it is definitely like interesting because he's like a chum, a companion is somebody you do something with. Like your game night group that came from the men's ministry may not be your friends. They may be your buddies. They may be your pals. They may be the guys who are like, hey, I love doing stuff with these guys. But man, that intimate friendship is going to birth from that. And so that true friend, somebody you're going to be able to be vulnerable with and walk with in that vulnerability, that's found out of those friends. Don't jump the shark, right? Don't jump past that affinity group, or you're really going to be fighting uphill to find friends, because it's not going to easily develop if you don't have that group of singers that love to sing, or that group of whatever you name it. Like that's why being on a team at church, when you're really enjoy it. You're not just serving to serve. You're actually doing your passion. That's why you'll find our worship team is filled with people who enjoy each other, and some of them are actually true friends because they all have that affinity. The same thing with drama. You're going to find people who they just love drama, and they've made these friendships out of it. And, deep. Some of them very deep friendships. Same thing as like Boy Scouts, and these different kinds of middle groups are very, very powerful. Now, let's talk about vulnerability real quick, because I know this is one when we originally started working through the series. Yeah, Stephen, you did a pretty strong pushback on, because you know that there's a lot of danger involved in vulnerability with the wrong kind of person, right?
Yeah. Well, and then there are just people that are way too open, and then there are people who are way too closed. Yeah.
Who's too open?
So the church is always like, hey, open up, tell us, what's going on in your life so we can help you. And I think that's a good thing to say, because if you're going to find someone that's pretty healthy, you're most likely going to find them at a church that's going to be the most healthy. But that doesn't mean everyone there is healthy. And you have to be able to have the wisdom and discernment to know what kind of spiritual person you should share with, because you can really get hurt a lot if you're not really centered on Christ. you're not really centered on discernment very well. And so I'm one of these people that's leery. I grew up in church my whole life, and so I've heard this push to be like, be open, and I've seen people use that to force you to do something or to get you to be in a group or to kind of manipulate it. And so it's a fear of mine.
What I understand is the openness thing is really about authenticity. There was an entire set of generations that honestly the elders of the church were like, it's considered these godly spiritual men, but behind the doors you're yelling and screaming at each other. They're going out and getting smoke breaks and drinking like crazy, and they got girlfriends on the side, and it was like a generation grew up and said, yuck, that's not Christianity. How are these people, the leaders and the elders and the people in the church, oh, well, we're above reproach because you don't see it, kind of attitude versus I'm going to expose my sins and put them out there, and I'm going to show you who I truly am, because that's the only way that I can truly walk in front with integrity, is that everything's out there. But then authenticity moves so far the other direction where it's like, I effing can say whatever I want because I'm being authentic.
Well, the other thing was authenticity is a value only insofar as you're willing to change towards the good. So,
right.
Say
that again in a different way, because that was really important. That was really good.
Authenticity only has value in so much as its intent is to do that which is good or to change the good in you. So if I'm authentically a jerk, I'm being authentic, but I'm not being good. And so the idea is that if I'm just my authentic self, that's better than if you were lying to me, but it doesn't make what you're doing good. So if I'm authentic, I should be being authentic so that you can hold me accountable to what's good for me, not so that I can continue to get away with what I'm doing. So if I'm an authentic liar, then everybody just lets me lie.
Yeah, we don't want an authentic pedophile.
Right. This idea.
In the sense that they're like, this is who I am, so deal with it. You're like, no.
The truth is good, but you need to know what to do with it. So I know it's true that you're this way. It is not good for you to stay there. So you need to be authentic and good. Which is hard, and that's where the work comes in.
Our culture gets really confused about that because we don't know what the good is.
We value authenticity because it helps us relate to your humanity. And others who hide their humanity, we think, they're fake. But to be really bad and to be really transparent and then to be attracted, then you just like bad things. And that's not healthy. And so I think that's where the shift came. It went from people being not authentic to being so authentic they never felt they needed to change because they told you who they were. It's your fault for not listening. You know what I mean? Is they put the blame.
Take me as I am.
Yeah, take me as I am. And their songs,
do you.
All our music is about, I am my authentic self. Yeah, you're authentically not good. You hurt people. You don't care about anyone else but yourself. Everyone has to change their opinion around you.
Smuggling ring back there of things that you shouldn't be doing.
You're authentic
about it.
But what I'm saying, is this love in our culture for authenticity became an excuse to just do whatever you want to do without being held accountable because you are already confessed. The confession doesn't mean anything without repentance to me. And I've said this time and time again, people will confess, and this happens a lot in Catholicism, but also in Christianity, Protestants, where you've identified a sin and somehow that solves the problem. Well, it didn't solve the problem for Israel. No. It was the relationship with Christ and the ability of the Holy Spirit to change you is the only thing that's going to stop you from being yourself. And so the idea that you've identified it and don't have to deal with it, that's just in washing your hands of the sin. You're saying, I don't need to deal with the truth in my life. I can just ignore it and go about my life. And you should respect that. I don't think you have to. And I think if everybody thinks that way, that's why everybody's getting hurt and feels lonely. If everyone is like, everyone has to take me as I am, then no one is taking anyone else as they are. Right. And so we have a world of lonely people who are authentic and lonely.
It destroys the first part of vulnerability, which is you have to be honest. You have to be truthful.
Yeah.
But it's truth and love, as we'll find out. It's not just truth as truth, but it is the ability to be truthful. Like, I disagree with you. And then we got to be able to go, great.
How do we resolve disagreement?
Like, otherwise, we're not going to have fun conversations because if we agreed on everything, we're boring.
I will definitely push your buttons if that's it. I mean, I've told people, like, if you want to be in a friendship, if you want to be in a friendship with me, it's hard because you might...
Oh my gosh, guys, it is so hard. I'm just kidding.
No, because like I come from a world of you have to be tough to you have to take a lot of abuse. I grew up in the inner city. Just to get on the bus, you're going to have 6 people insult you. Hey, what are you looking at?
Oh, and I know that
you want to
makes you-
sit there? Is that mine? You know, like it
I
just
know that makes you tough because I grew up in the suburbs and I have thin skin. I was like, no, I'm not gonna hurt your feelings.
Yeah, and people are looking to hurt your feelings. It's a sport for some of them. So you have to be kind of ability to be like, oh man, what is wrong with that person? You know, and you have to not let that affect you to be mean either. And so the idea for me was, I don't know how to. I had a hard time just letting certain things go. People would say, hey, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of this hat? Or what do I think of this thing? And I was like, do you want an honest opinion? Or do you want me to be like, yeah, you look good or whatever? Which is really hard for someone like me because it's like, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but I cannot
That's why I
entertain that.
Why are you asking the question?
Yeah.
I really want to know what's behind this.
Yeah, like you know. So to me, it's like it's so. In order to be friends in an intimate circle, you have to have a certain amount of ability to take criticism
and back and forth.
And back and forth. Yeah, and you have and I have to let you criticize me. See, sometimes I become friends with somebody right away because they told me their opinion. They're like, I don't like that when you do that. Oh, okay, we might be friends then, because I like.
You want reality.
I want to know what you're really feeling. What I really hate is when someone says, oh, yeah, I really love to hang out with you, and then they never call you.
And this is the thing. This is what gets to it be one of the big portions of being a safe person.
Yeah.
Is that you can handle disagreement. And it doesn't make it personal. It's not something
you work through the person. If it hurts, it hurts.
Like,
but you work it out.
In our premarital counseling, Tress and I always talk to people who are about to get married. And our biggest thing is like, look, you're freaked out because you're going to fight. We're telling you it's the greatest thing you could possibly do if you do it right. If people will argue together and resolve it, it creates a bond that can't be broken. You've resolved that with someone. That's like huge. It's this concept that was called the shining barrier. You know,
it's like the mortar in the strength between the bricks.
It's the same thing with friends, though. As friends go through fights and resolve those fights or resolve those issues and really are willing to like wrestle through the muck and the mire of things, man, they come out stronger in the end. They do. They come out unified because you know, like, hey, man, I screwed that up, but you know, I care about you. I'm trying my best to seek your good. Or the other person's like, you know what? I really hated you for telling me to do that, and I don't ever want. But you know, thank you for sticking with me and not giving up on me because I was pushing back so hard. That's incredible. That's life changing right there, and that's what people are missing. Is this kind of non-fair weather friend. It's like, that's a companion. That's somebody's like, well, I don't really want to do that with you. I just want to play games.
Well, the problem, I think that our ability to take difficulties is so strong emotional reaction that it prevents us from working through those difficulties to true friendships. It's like you see a little speck of gold inside the mine, but you just don't have the strength to care enough to dig it out. Because it's too hard, and it might hurt your fingers, and it might hurt your hands, and you're just like, I only want to look for the gold that's already sticking out. So you just keep roaming around, and you're like, I don't know why I'm not really connecting. It's like, I tell you, like, friendships are forged and made. They're not just found on the ground as easily. If you did find it that way, God bless you, but that's not how most people find friendships. And if you never polished that rock and you never made it into something, then you're still just sitting there with a lump of rock. And so the idea to me is that you have to be willing to have boring times with your friends or difficult conversations, or you don't text 10 friends and then go out with the friend that you think is going to give you the best value.
Right.
Then you're
using people.
Commodifying your friendships.
I mean, that's what Brent did to us. That's why he's not here today.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to get it. I'm just kidding.
He texts a bunch of other people he's out with.
Yeah. He's like, I don't have to do this Dinket podcast today. I'm going to go hang out with the doctors and get a shot. So
Yeah, well, I think what you have is like, this is the thing, like you put kids on the playground and you make them have to play with all of the people on the playground, then they have to learn how to deal with difficult people. And you can't manage every one of their friendships that way because it's just not good for them to only hang out with people that entertain their own thoughts and your lifestyle. It's just not healthy.
I don't know when we'll get into this, because we're talking about doing a series in February on community, which is very different than friendship. And like I go to Bonhoeffer and I think of his statement that as Christians, we don't get to tell God what the Christian community gets to look like.
Yeah.
And so they're your brothers and sisters and they're in your life. So you know what? Guess what? Yeah, you got to deal with it. And it's hard because there's a lot of helicopter parenting that has gone on. There's a lot of protect my baby that's gone on. And so a lot of young people, and I'm not trying to offend young people who are listening to this, but you need to ask yourself, am I actually capable of getting out of my bubble out of my feedback loop, engaging in what may be intensive opposing conversation. Because it's been evidenced throughout lots of colleges, universities, and other things that that's just not the case. Entire generation that cannot handle pushback or a difference of opinion, and therefore they really don't have friends. They have fellow activists. And that's not how a friend is made, because you're never, as long as you keep dividing up activists, you're just going to get smaller and smaller groups of activists.
Yeah, some of the best advancements in my faith were in engaging with friends who don't hold my faith, in the sense that they're willing to argue out their best arguments. And I'm pushing back, and I'm looking, and I'm learning, and I'm thinking, okay, I get that, why they're coming from that angle. But if I remove all those friendships and relationships, if I remove those conflicts, I just become kind of a feedback loop of every one of my own weaknesses, and it amplifies after a while. You start amplifying your weaknesses to the point where you don't even see that you're walking around like the emperor without clothes on. It's such a huge, everybody sees it but you and the group that you hang out with. It's called groupthink. And if you look at psychology, it's been the ruin of a lot of situations, where everybody's thinking so much alike. So like this happened during the Kennedy administration. Everybody during the Cuban Missile Crisis thought so much alike. They didn't have anyone that was playing the devil's advocate on the cabinet. And so they walked in and had this huge fiasco occur. And so from that point forward, each presidential cabinet typically finds someone who'll play the devil's advocate, who pushes back on the group so that they don't get into groupthink. And so if you're removing every oppositional thought from your mind and your worldview because you can't even tolerate to hear it, then you're actually harming yourself. And the thing about you that you don't see is going to be more. They're not your friends. If no one's willing to tell you that you're walking around naked,
they're not a safe person.
They're not. They don't have your best interest at heart.
And that's the other part why vulnerability has to be reciprocal.
Yeah.
And why honesty is the first route. I really think that if you don't find somebody who can be honest with you, if they're going to people please you, you're just going to hear the same opinion back. You don't have any differences. You're not meeting someone that you can really open your heart up to. And confession should not be attempted, and neither should true encouragement or true rebuke.
And it happens not just outside the church, it happens inside the church. Oftentimes it's hard for us we come to church and we're trying to be more like Christ together. And so oftentimes in trying to put our best attempt to be like Christ forward, when we fall short, we get embarrassed. And that embarrassment is hard to deal with. And the thing about one step below personal is people that are transparent with you, that are honest with you, is what we're talking about, intimate, really close friends. They see your weaknesses. They just look past it to what God has for you and intends the best for you. So someone's really close. They're not ignoring your weaknesses, but they don't stop the friendship because of them.
That's that love. That's that love that sticks around because they see something greater.
And that's what you need. You need someone who, when you fall short, you can be embarrassed in front of them and they still love you.
Now, I think this leads then to the question that Anna asked. So why don't we go with that?
Sure. Yeah, a lot. We can go on friendships for a long time.
Oh, yes. And when we bring my wife in next week.
Yeah. No, it'd be great to have a female perspective.
I'm just going to be quiet and let her go because she's got tons and tons of.
In many ways, women have more insight into social connections and social interactions than sometimes men do.
I think my wife's a genius when it comes to friendships and stuff.
So this is Anna Pisani, and thank you so much for your question. She sent it in to us. I really enjoy and appreciate your podcast regarding the first sermon on friendship. That was last week's, right?
Yes.
I especially liked hearing your perspective as men. It would also be very valuable to hear a woman's perspective. I believe that although there are a lot of similarities with female and male friendships, there's also a lot of differences. So that leads into what we're talking about. Your wife's going to be here maybe next week or a week?
Looks like she's giving us a thumbs up.
So that's good. So the first part of her response, but she did like our podcast. So next week you'll have a female point of view. Hopefully that'll be helpful. So send in a question if you have one from the female perspective. Her real question here today, though, is sometimes the level of friendships between two people is not the same. Are there any biblical principles that could help address these mismatched expectations? And in an unmatched friendship, how do we balance the Christian call to love others with the need for a healthy relationship? Thank you so much. And I think that's a great question when it comes to boundaries, because that is the tension, isn't it? It's not something that is just black and white. You get one scripture and it helps you deal with how long do you carry a friend before you tell them, you know what, I'm not helping you, I'm actually hurting you by carrying this for too long. I think friendships are never, like they say with wedding or marriages, they're not 50-50. Sometimes they're 70-30, and sometimes you're carrying the other person, sometimes the other person's carrying you. I think friendships are very similar in the sense that there are times in which I'm called to bring a immature person on, but I don't think of that as the same kind of a friendship as someone that's going to spur me on. We're not that close in that situation. I'm called to take a different position, to be an older brother or sister for a period of time, and in that setting, I'm teaching the values that I think the Bible is teaching me when it comes to boundaries.
It becomes ministry.
It becomes a ministry, and any sacrifice you make to yourself is rewarded by God, and you need to be strengthened by true friendships that are more intimate, that are healthy. You're going to need those if you're going to do that. This is something that you find in counseling. Everything in counseling is intimate, but you're not necessarily their friend, but you care about them and you develop an empathy for them and you want the best for their life. So it's similar to a friendship, but my role in that situation really isn't to be your friend. It's to be someone to guide you through and to coach you through an experience to health. But for me to stay healthy in doing that, because many counselors, that's the entire point of the relationship. It's all one up, one down the entire time. I need to be in a healthy relationship. So they put you in supervision. Someone's looking out for you to get healthy. And then there are other people that you're helping in supervision. So the idea is, in a friendship, this principle applies. In order to be a stronger brother, you have to have walked and had a healthy enough of relationships in your own life that when you're carrying someone along to teach them something the Lord wants to teach them, that you have the relationships that'll sustain you as well. So that balance between having safe friends and ones that you're evaluating whether they're safe and coaching towards safety is a very good thing to have. And I would encourage the book to read is Safe People, because sometimes you cannot cut some of these people out of your life that you have to maintain a kind of a friendship with because of whatever the circumstance. It could be family, could be friends.
So I think some of the biblical terms that we would want to remember is that you can be a friend with, like, you can be a companion, a buddy, with non-Christians. I really do think that you can even step into a level of true friendship where you're being honest about where you're at, and as long as you are willing to understand that you're not going to take their advice now, and you're not going to partner with them further. Like this really seriously comes to mind when 2 Corinthians 6:14 says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness, or what accord does Christ have with Belial, or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement is the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God." And of course, in this case, he's not saying you can't be around these people, you can't befriend them. Friendship is one of the most powerful manners to bring about salvation. It is saying that you don't put yourself in a contractual, covenantal relationship with those who are unbelievers. In the case of another verse comes up where Paul is writing, and he's talking about the sexually immoral and impurity and covetousness must not even be named among you as proper among the saints. Let therefore there be no filthiness or foolish talk nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure or is covetous, that is an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not become partners with them. And you could say that means, don't join in with their attitudes and their things. Yes. If you find that if it's a misbalance and they're influencing you more than you're influencing them, it may be time to pick up that friendship and move it up a notch back to companions or buddies or something like that. Because the goal here is to remind you that he finishes at this, for at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. In the cases of some friendships, you may have both been friends as non-Christians at the beginning and the equal plane, and you came to Christ, and now you're on completely different wavelengths. You've moved way past them, spiritually mature. You're not cussing, you're not engaging these things, and you have to be able to make the determination: are you partnering with them? Are you finding that they're influencing you? Are you locking in with them? That's another form of a misbalance.
Yeah, I think that's when you're starting to whether to cut ties or to limit the amount of influence. And you can do that as a person in any condition, weak or strong. You're saying, look, I'm not strong enough to hang out with you and maintain. I have bad moods that when I'm with you, our friendship draws out these things, and I'm not strong enough to deal with it. I need to go fix myself, so I'm going to limit this relationship. Whether you make that public or you choose to do that in your friendship, I think that's a wise thing to do. The other one reminds me of Galatians. I don't know if you have that.
Oh, yeah.
The Galatians verse I have is Galatians 1. It says, brother, this is if you are trying to, in that situation of coaching, where you realize, okay, I'm helping a weaker friend right now. They're leaning on me more.
You're talking about Galatians 6?
Galatians 6:1, yeah. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression. Now, we think of the word transgression as a sin, and I do think it is a sin, but it also is like a violation of a boundary situation, that someone is transgressing something. Maybe they're being a little
trust.
selfish, or they're doing a little something to you because of the situation that they're in. It says, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Hey, like, it's been 8 months, and I know that you need my friendship, and I'm really willing to hear it, but I just want you to know that, like, I feel like we haven't really had that friendship time together because you're in need. And so if I back away, it's not because I'm losing the friendship, but I need to be in a space where I'm getting help from people who are healthy as well. You may not make these public depending on what the situation is for someone, but you may need to do this internally is what I'm saying. So like what happens to me in having friends that have mental illnesses, sometimes there's this tendency to want to carry that mental illness because they're going through a difficult time. And you're like, I don't want to just leave them to themselves. But there's a point at which you're doing it as a harm to you and everyone else because they are taking from you and you don't have the capacity to help that person all the way through. And at that point, you have to say, like, I need to cut back a little bit on this interaction until it becomes a little bit more healthy for me, and I think that's okay to do because you could be pulled into the same kind of personality where you're just either being taken advantage of or you start mimicking the behavior of the person that you're trying to help.
Now, there's the last one, which is the imbalance that can occur in the sense of like sometimes they're stronger than you or you're stronger than them. In this case, that's the iron sharpening.
Yeah,
iron
let it sharpen you.
That doesn't mean that the relationship needs to be broken. But I think if someone's not reciprocating, I just wouldn't use the word friend anymore.
Yeah,
I would just say, hey, this is a ministerial conversation. I feel like I can minister to you. I feel like I can care about you. But I just think you need to know that because when we're not on equal ground here, and so you're a good friend, but you're not like one of my true friends. Like you don't even have to declare that. Just need to say it to yourself. So there's no confusion about like, it's okay. I don't need to be at the same level with everybody. And I think that's actually something I've seen many people struggle with is just like, I've got this friend, but we're not close. And it's like, or I don't have any friend. All my friends are friends. And it's like, but there's nobody you're close to. And so you don't want to get too close to anybody because I've got so many friends. Both those are dangers that you have to be aware of in those misbalances because you need the group, the companions, you need that teammate, but you need those true friends. And if somebody's not reciprocating, they're not a true friend. They're just a teammate. They may be a book club person. They may be somebody who enjoys reading the same stuff you do or playing pickleball or whatever's going on. But that doesn't mean that you should count them as one of those true friends that you're going to like, hey, I'm going to lean on you in the midst of the storm.
And I think it's okay to do that. Even if you don't, the reason why we keep saying even if you don't verbalize this, because every scenario is different. And sometimes you need to understand this because the other person can't comprehend it and they need your support. So if you start having a conversation where I don't consider you my friend, it's probably not going to go over too well, but you need to know that in the situation that they're in, they can't provide to you a healthy friendship right now. And if that's okay with you because you feel like you're strong enough and you have other friendships, then you're ministering to them and it's okay to love them because that might change. At some point, you might be the unhealthy person and they might have matured. And so that's what I'm saying is, but you need to know where that is. You have to be able to evaluate what's going on and to make those judgments. And that's why the book Safe People kind of goes through a more diagnostic of how to do that, how to find out whether you're safe and how to find out how to deal with unsafe people that are in your life and how to manage people that are safe so you have healthy relationships. So,
okay. There was a second question as well.
Yeah, let's see if there's another question here.
Hope that helps, Anna. Follow it up, send it back to us, and we'll Teresa answer it. No, just kidding. She's not going to be like, what?
This is our last question, and this is just related to the disciples, and this is from the same person that sent us the picture. Her name is Sylvia, yeah. Sylvia sent us, everyone should know Matthew, Mark, Peter, Luke, and perhaps Judas. But what about the rest of them? In a world where it seems like everyone wants their 15 minutes of fame, out of all the disciples, who are your top 3 unsung heroes and why? Thank you.
The disciples, not the apostles. Like, so just
Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't know.
Mark isn't an apostle, so
maybe she's thinking the apostles and the as well. But sometimes the list gets confusing. I know.
Of all the unmentioned disciples and apostles.
The thing that throws me off is that they have 2 or 3 names sometimes, and you're trying to figure out, like, okay, is that John the Lesser or John the Greater?
Onesimus, he was this runaway slave.
Is it James the Lesser, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
James the Greater, James the Lesser. Those are the 2.
Yeah, and James the Greater is the one who's killed in the Book of Acts.
He's the brother of John.
Of John, right?
Yeah. So you got Simon. I got a list. I wrote a list. Simon, Andrew, James the Greater, John, Philip, Bartholomew, which is Nathaniel, Matthew, who's also Levi, Thomas, James the Lesser, which is also son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, which is also called Jude, Simon the Zealot, and then who's not the same as Peter, so who's also
he's really zealous.
Yeah, and then Judas Iscariot.
He's the super excited Peter versus the other Peter.
He's really excited,
really pumped up.
He's the ADHD member of the disciples. So you have any great hits? I know a lot of these, a few of them are mentioned in the scriptures. We find out what happens to James the Greater because he's one of the first to get martyred. The Bible talks about him being beheaded by Herod Agrippa in Jerusalem. And we know that Simon dies, but we don't know how and by what means. And we know Paul is not in this list, but he was sent to Rome. So he's not really a disciple, but he's an apostle. And so,
I mean, like for me, I personally, from the little bits that I studied of their post-biblical history, there's
a lot of history here.
I like Bartholomew, Nathaniel, not just because I named
your son.
My son's named Nathaniel, but because dude was a champ. Like he's got some, he's claimed to be the kind of the origin of the Armenian church, not the Armenian church. Those are different things. And it was, as far as we know, I mean, he was brutally killed enough that the legends create different kinds of brutality that was done to him. So we don't need to know it's specifically what they were. I've heard that he was, beheaded. I've heard that he was literally crucified twice and he got off and he was, there's a lot of interesting things like that. But, I think he hits on my top hits. And like I said, if you want to choose just random disciples, I love Onesimus from the book of Philemon. He's the runaway slave who supposedly had stolen something likely from Philemon, ran to Rome to get safe and runs into Paul. And Paul converts him in Rome and sends him back, and now Philemon's going to set him free. And it's very likely Onesimus is not just set free, but he becomes the bishop of Ephesus. And the leader and the father, having been trained by John, the apostle, there in Ephesus so he got both Paul and John and was considered one of the greatest.
I always tell people it's just weird to have a guy who was probably an elder in the church, but he's a slave, and then you go home, he's your slave, but in church, you're his elder.
Yeah, no, that was why there was this sense of we got to free these people. We can't play this game. This is crazy.
Well, it is like people just don't think about the history. That happened a lot where someone was a leader in the church, but was a slave in the community. And that's how Christian communities were formed. I don't know, when she says unsung, I guess that means that not the ones that are big. For me, John is my favorite of the apostles or of the disciples of the 12. I can't go without Peter. But if you're talking about lesser, I guess it's I know everybody doesn't like Thomas, but I kind of like Thomas because he asks questions and he has doubts and he gets them resolved.
And he was a twin.
Yeah. Well, his name means twin, right? So is there two Thomases? Thomas?
No, this is one of the, there's kind of curious things like James, the son of Alphaeus. Well, guess what? Matthew is also the son of Alphaeus, Levi, the son of Alphaeus, so that sometimes they thought...
They were brothers?
Yeah, they may be brothers. John MacArthur does a actually fairly good book on the 12 apostles, and he kind of digs into some of these details. I was looking up Philip as another one of these interesting guys, and Philip is just one of these people who apparently he ends up being the he's the one who brings the food and hasn't multiplied, and he's kind of the guy who's been brought by Nathaniel. And then it says the ancient historian Eusebius was one of those who confused the two biblical figures between different Philips, the Philip the evangelist and this Philip. So although I do like Stephen as well, who doesn't get, he's a hero, but he's not like, he's a disciple. So there's a lot of cool people.
People like to throw stones at me all the time because of my namesake. My other lesser is this Timothy. Timothy is the other. I like Timothy. I don't know, maybe because he has stomach problems and he takes medicine. But I just feel like there's a guy that's like, oh my gosh, I feel overwhelmed in ministry. And Paul's like, don't worry, it is overwhelming, but you'll be okay. The Lord's with you. And just the heavy that he feels about taking the responsibility on of being involved in a church, even though he felt like maybe he didn't feel as adequate because of his age or whatever. I always like that kind of stuff. I kind of want to know what happens to some of these in heaven. I think a large portion of the book of Acts will get his part 2 in heaven. Like, okay, what happened to this guy? Where did he go? What were his stories? What were the miracles that he saw?
Yeah, there's a couple. If you're interested in digging into some of these things, Sean McDowell has a book out. What was that one? I don't remember the name.
It's based on his thesis. I was going to look it up. Nope. It was a while back. Sorry. I just type it in.
Well, as he's looking up that one, there's also another one that is called After Acts by Brian Litfin, sorry. And Brian goes through all of the different authors: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Mary, Thomas, James, and he hits the other apostles, and Peter, Paul, and he tries to help you kind of. It's a Moody Bible book, and so he's trying to help people really kind of work through, well, what happened to these guys? What do we really know? He does archaeological. He does a lot of things similar to, I think, what Sean's doing.
I guess he did his thesis on the fate of the apostles. So his book is called The Fate of the Apostles, Examining the Claims of the New Testament. So he goes through each of what happened to them, which ones were martyred. It looks through all the history and kind of digs through some of that. There's been a lot of myths surrounding a lot of these that show up later on. So it's like peeling back some of those layers and seeing what the historic record actually conveys. So
yeah, I mean, like, there's so many cool, like, just study church history is so amazing. The faithfulness of these early Christians the stories we have, and I don't necessarily think we have to think that that some of these miracles did not occur. I think in a lot of cases there may be some fiction, but that, like, to be honest, sometimes just like, why would they say this if there were like certain miracles that happened in the Colosseum while they're being attacked? It's like, that's pretty early, and why would we even think that something like that didn't happen when you have thousands of people who witness it and a whole bunch of people come to know Jesus through it? It's some pretty incredible stuff in church history. Don't ignore it. I recommend it. But all that said, we've been talking for a while. Thank you guys for connecting with us. We got just some more that we'll be coming with on Friendship. My wife Teresa should be with us next week, I hope. And we're looking forward to that. And hopefully we'll have the middle of the Oreo cookie back too. And so his name is Brent, by the way.
And if your wife's not here, we'll put a wig on him and he can pitch his voice up a little lower.
Yo, I don't know about that. But anyway,
he'll be the female perspective.
Right. If you have any questions, you want to send them our direction, we'd be glad to. That just went way too far in the wrong direction, but we'd be glad to answer your questions at rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. And for the middle of the Oreo cookie, we will say, boom chakalaka.
Bye.